Another big story in the news right now is Operation Fast and Furious, with a subpoena being issued actually to Attorney General Eric Holder, with some on the Republican side who are investigating this operation that was supposed to track gun-running operations south of the border. Some are saying that Holder is being misleading, if not actually lying, when he says that he wasn't even aware of the program until just a few months ago. They've produced some emails that they say indicate that, in fact, he had prior knowledge. So joining us now to talk about the congressional investigation, also the calls for a special counsel, etc., we have Congressman Paul Gosar, who is a Republican from Arizona, and he joins us now to talk about the latest controversy involving Fast and Furious. Thanks for being with us, Congressman.
Thanks for having me, Patty.
What evidence do you feel exists to say that Attorney General Holder is lying, or at least being misleading, when he says that he didn't even know about Operation Fast and Furious until a short time ago?
Well, first of all, I think we go back, way back in time, to April 2nd of 2009, where he, in Mexico, talks about, in his speech, he outlines tactical changes to Operation Gunrunner, which ends up being this. And you can't tell me that he didn't know about that, because in Arizona, anytime we sneeze or hiccup, he knows about it and this administration knows about it. We can also say that, you know, as a healthcare professional, I watch people with their body language and how they carefully picked words. Go back and I ask Americans to go back and look at his testimony and how he deflects it with his eyes and how he changes his posture and carefully picks his words. Plus, there's documentation that shows that numerous aides close to him presented these around the March and April of last year. And you know what? He made the comments been made as well. I get thousands of these going across that. When you make this a major directive, this is important that you know about there. There's no excuse for that. So we don't buy it.
All right. And if we can just explain, actually our viewers here on FoxNews.com Live are mainly pretty familiar with this program, but can you just explain briefly what the idea was behind this operation and what went wrong?
Well, typically is they're trying to follow the movement of guns, and then that's called gun walking. But in this case, in prior cases, there was total surveillance and there was total tracking, which means that there were devices put on these weapons, even if they were decoys, to follow their every movement so that they didn't get it out of the way. What went wrong in here, and the authorization that occurred here, was there was no surveillance, no tracking whatsoever on these up to 2,000 guns that were walked. And these are high-powered weapons, 50 caliber AK-47s. And so what that's going to happen, what's different here is that we as citizens in the United States, as well as those on the Mexican side, are used as collateral damage, where your livelihoods and your lives are put at risk. Because the only way you're going to find them is at crime scenes, Patty.
And in fact, that has been happening. They've been turning up at crime scenes, and most notably the case of Brian Terry, the death of a federal agent, where one of these guns that was lost track of was used in that crime.
And Patty,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other thing that we also want to acknowledge is that over hundreds of Mexican victims and citizens have been killed by these guns. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge all the way across the boards that we actually put guns in criminals' hands and then fail to do any surveillance and follow through that normal law enforcement would do.
And so now it is a big, major controversy, obviously, and there has been an investigation, and Holder has made some comments that some on the Congressional committee investigating this feel have been disingenuous. So now you have today's subpoenas to the Attorney General, which are asking for information for about a dozen Justice Department officials?
Yes.
All right. What specifically are you looking for?
Well, we're looking at all the dialogue that came from ground level in Arizona, on the border in Arizona with these special agents, all the way tracking it up the food chain. It goes to Mr. Holder, all the assistant attorney generals. It even goes to communications from then U.S. Attorney Dennis Burke's office. So what we're trying to do is put the facts together all the way through here to make sure that everybody that was accountable for this is held to the higher standard of the law. And this gives a great opportunity for the Attorney General to stop his rhetoric and make sure that he's compliant with all these subpoenas and making sure that it's forthright, not redacted, and in a speedy manner that he promises that he said in his last Friday memo.
Yeah, you mentioned redacted. Some of the documents that have been produced so far are very heavily redacted. Of course, that's often necessary in a case like this when you're dealing with undercover operations and gun running and drug cartels and whatnot. But do you feel that some of these redactions might be unnecessary?
Very much unnecessary. And particularly, you highlighted it earlier, especially when you have a drug enforcement officer who's been killed by these guns, and there should have been some accountability even before this. There's been cover-up. We didn't even share this information with the Mexican government, which is heinous in its own right. But then we also continue to deflect the challenge by trying to throw out, well, the Bush administration did this Operation Wide Receiver that never lost track of guns, and trying to deflect that aspect. So it's very disingenuous trying to make sure that confuses the American people and stops their forthright aspect of being accountable personally and accountably as the leader of the DOJ.
So, as we mentioned earlier, in addition to the congressional investigation into this operation, there are also calls from the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Lamar Smith, for a special counsel to be appointed to look into this as well. Where does that stand?
Well, we want the same thing. We want somebody that's not any affiliation with the administration, that's not appointed by the DOJ, that has full rights and disclosure to have oversight if that's what we're going to do. We also want to make sure that the government oversight and the Senate and House do their due diligence and have compliance by the Attorney General, and all those associated with implications with this come forth and be compliant with the subpoenas that we're entitled to as far as the oversight of the regulatory aspect of the DOJ.
All right. So a lot happening in these investigations. We'll have to see where it all goes. Congressman Paul Gosar, Republican of Arizona, thank you so much for joining us today to discuss this.
Thanks so very much, and thanks for keeping this in the spotlight.
All right.